Warning. The following audio material can cause irreversible brain damage. As a result, your consciousness, feelings and behavior may change. By proceeding, you agree to listen to the Sam Brainwasher at your own risk. If you suffer from psychosis, hypotonia or epilepsy, please stop this disc now. I repeat, please stop this disc now.
Deep beneath the ocean of probabilities, the shadow of determinism hovers over our futures. In hotel rooms with dingy walls and carpets sprinkled with cigarette burns, in Orwellian interrogation rooms reeking of piss and fear, in esoteric facilities preferring to remain forgotten, humans trained to control humans. When all the brains reach DEFCON 1, a gun is cocked against the integrity of the mind. The two enfants terribles of the 20th century seem to be shattering something ancient and unspeakable within us, without anyone noticing. With exponential technological progress and the birth of a global communication system, the way we see the world is changing and converging on the need for a new world order. With nuclear deterrence as a basic premise and ideology as an excuse, an invisible struggle for the throne at the top of the hill begins. A proxy war on a global scale, cold only for its main players, very real for the entire peoples used as a proxy army, for the countries used as a virtual battlefield in a multiplayer game conducted from the other side of the globe. The objective of the game is to make the opponent capitulate, and the main gameplay mechanic is neo-colonial imperialism. The winner is the one most capable of stripping peoples of their identity. Whoever can erase nation, ethnicity, ideology, religion, culture and language with a colossal semi-autonomous machine will win. The military-industrial complex becomes the attack dog of the masters of finance, and its owners demand fresh blood. War is changing. Trenches and invasions are being transformed into clandestine operations, bombings, false flag attacks, espionage, assassinations, sponsored coups, information warfare and psyops, psychological warfare in the mass media, mind control in synthetic psychotropic drugs of a new kind. War has changed because it can now be fought without soldiers or battlefields. It can take place in your own home, while you're out shopping or walking the dog. Maybe the cashier is a KGB sleeper. Maybe your neighbor is an MK Ultra drone. Perhaps you yourself have been kidnapped, drugged, tortured and hypnotized in a CIA hideout, and without even being aware of it, you're a terminal connected to an activation signal ready to transmit and execute instructions for targeted assassinations or false flag terrorism. War has taken hold of you to break down your ego and replace it with a subroutine of the brain machine. In the midst of this interweaving of actors, interests, causal relationships and dependencies, distracted by layers of manipulation and lies distilled through billions of silicon chips and fiber optic cables, the fetus of a third enfant terrible silently feeds on information and grows. Until September 2001, when it finally emerges from the shadows and coldly announces its terms. Birthed by decades of CIA orchestrated machinations and their disastrous human consequences, the War on Terror is born in a world that no longer understands itself. After a post-masturbatory end-of-century disgust marked by decades of economic crisis, disillusionment and popular mistrust, a problem is curiously born into a solution. To make sense of the world again, it had to be simplified, and that's precisely what happened.
And for the United States, I want to tell the United States and its people, I swear by God, by Allah, He who has raised the sky that the United States will not have peace.
Terrorism, by providing a murky, elusive enemy, was exactly what they needed. By portraying the peril to be combated as a mortal enemy opposed to everything that is the West, and as an eternal threat ending only in the eradication of one or the other, a simple, one-sided geopolitical grid was born. The axis of evil versus the United Nations. In reality, this illusion is based on a frighteningly simple principle of manipulation. Al-Qaeda terrorism is the direct consequence of US-Soviet intervention in the Middle East. The Taliban were armed, trained and financed by the CIA and are waging an asymmetrical conflict based on guerrilla tactics. While the failure in Vietnam left its mark on the whole of popular culture in the second half of the 20th century. Why get bogged down in such a blatantly similar situation?
It's changed. When the battlefield is under total control, war becomes routine.
The real horror of the war on terror is that there's no question of a victorious outcome. Its aim is to perpetuate itself indefinitely, embarking on a vicious circle of interventionism, pushing populations towards radicalization, pushing terrorism, pushing interventionism again. An endless struggle built on straw men, delighting the military-industrial complex and driving the war economy. An inhuman conflict in the truest sense of the word, not because of its undeniable cruelty and consequences for civilian populations, but because of its interdependence on monetary flows now supervised by thousands of increasingly autonomous algorithms. Our own tool of control slowly slipping out of our hands and deciding to do what it was created to do. Maximize profit. To produce and grow without the slightest restraint. Reality ceased to belong to us the day our masters decided to believe in their own hallucinations to preserve their privileges. This is how our capitalist system no longer needs a pilot at the top to run autonomously until time runs out. And so, with virtual numbers, a god from the hyper-parasitic machine conditions our behavior and determines our actions according to the most productive pattern for his institutions. And so reality and fiction cease to exist, merging into a hyper-norm. We have come to accept that history becomes a lie to kill the inconceivable truth of impermanence.
Honestly, though, you have played the game for a long time. Don't you have anything else to do with your time?
The brainwashing machine no longer needs to resort to such esoteric means as the CIA's obscure projects in their day. Its total mimetic hegemony over culture excuses the effort of reprogramming, which starts as soon as possible and never stops.
C'est un choix que j'ai fait, mais tu sais pourquoi? Parce que Brigitte, qui est ma femme, elle avait 3 enfants. Qui étaient déjà, il y en a qui étaient grands quand je l'ai connue, il y en a qui étaient plus petits. Donc, tu vois, la dernière, elle avait votre âge quand je l'ai connue. Et après, tu vois, on s'est posé la question. Et moi, j'ai considéré que le plus important, c'était qu'on élève bien les enfants, qu'on les aime.
School isn't there to teach the basics, to provide the highest possible level of education for all, nor to prepare people for working life. As an institution, school serves to nip revolt in the bud, formatted to institutions and adapted to docility. Adolescence is not the extreme insecurity of physically and mentally metamorphosing into adulthood in a world without comfort or validation. It's not the consequence of a dissonance between what the adolescent experience really is and the fantasized standards integrated from birth. Not the fault of the awakening of a sexuality in a double game of oppressive sexual liberation and guilt-inducing morality. Of the absence of real education about our own bodies. Not the fault of the stress of already having to plan your whole future without having the time to discover yourself, to build a healthy and whole adult personality. No, adolescence is the stupid age. It's the hormones that come with puberty that make you unstable. Adolescence, you grow up gritting your teeth, either getting through it or whimsically choosing suicide. Adolescence you get through when you finally feel something dying inside you. Imperialism, neo-colonialism, democratic values of civility and respect that aid in the castration of a long revolutionary tradition, primary school lessons explaining the crucial importance of limiting, sorting, recycling the waste. You were encouraged, but not forced, to buy in the first place. Civic education classes that obscure the majority of the spectrum of possibilities, giving an illusion of choice, all belonging to the same predetermined panels. The carrot of a pretense of openness to critical thinking, omitting to specify that this openness is only for the most blunted of opinions. You want to be on the left? We understand. You're probably a little bourgeois white savior. We can offer you the spineless plastic rose of social democracy. You want to be on the right. The system already is. No worries as long as you contribute to it. Beat up some environmental activists and sink migrant boats at will, as long as you avoid blowing up central banks. The school raises citizens, and the citizen must understand that their actions count, that their voice is important. The democratic responsibility that is rightfully theirs. It is up to them to put the world back on track while not deviating themselves from the democratic norm. It is up to them to be eco-friendly. It is up to them to vote. And when they turn on their TV, it is up to them to accept a torrent of news and discussions about the increasing insecurity of the world. Before the school under the banner of liberty, equality and fraternity, there is above all the school of timetables, rules and punishments, the school of pseudo-meritocratic shenanigans, once telling you that if you don't succeed, it's because of your own lack of personal investment. Just be normal, they say. There's no special treatment here except for rich kids who'll never set foot in a public school and never have to prove themselves in working life. Targeted, grouped, institutionalized harassment, in many cases with the implicit blessing of adults, permanent policing, the scarecrow that if you don't go to school, you'll end up as a factory or supermarket worker like your semi-quarterly parents. The white bourgeois monoculture narrative of things, where learning about French colonial history from, say, an Algerian student is a straight-up joke.
Le préfet de police de Paris impose le couvre-feu à la population algérienne.
Culture's only meaning is the normalization of a surreal world, leading to total placid detachment, to the blissful acceptance of being smothered in an infosensory torrent of the false and the not-so-false indistinguishable. Not to accept this hypernormalization is to engage in a perpetual struggle against the insidious psychological weapon that is gaslighting. By definition, gaslighting translates into an impression of losing one's sanity, by being subjected to actions and words that are then instantly denied by their perpetrators, with the vocation of annihilating any semblance of confidence in one's own judgment. Insidious details that are insisted upon to the point of insanity, the better to maintain our hold on you. Police violence, systematically discredited by the funny crime numbers. The systemic violence of the rich and bourgeois excused in the face of our laziness and parasitism. The patriarchal hierarchy protected from the hysteria of attention-starved extremists.
L'important, c'est pas la chute.
What a privilege to live in a progressive world where these things have long since disappeared. Devoid of legitimacy in the face of our very real suffering. The cognitive dissonance between the two shatters us, dispossessing us of the very notion of reality. All that's left is the reptilian brain, fear and aggression in the stamina, the waltz between Eros and Thanatos. In this dynamic of troubled positions between demonization and fetishization, we come to turn away from rational choices and give in to the realm of impulse. We become slaves to the person who presses the buttons in our brains, begging them in turn for our dose of sensationalizing terror and material comfort. The politics of fear as an overture to available brain time, appealing as much as possible to this insecurity-ridden mind to comfort consumption. Slaves to fear, we are just as much slaves to a hope of success carefully cultivated in the vegetable garden of competitive meritocracy. Failure to succeed is a personal failure, not a social determinism. To have failed is to be too busy seeing others as competitors rather than comrades. And to succeed is to become the sacrificial carrot at the end of the propaganda stick. Too busy fighting each other in this glorified competitive FPS, nervously watching our performances and especially those of others. We forget why we're playing this game and who made us play it in the first place. There comes a point where the narrative no longer needs a platform to propagate itself. Inscribed deep within our sleeping minds, we become the primary infection vector of our own alienation. In the midst of psychological warfare, waged for decades by cabals that are themselves slaves to their own spawn, those who share the memes become slaves to those who created them. All these ideas, concepts, values, images and symbols that are supposed to belong to us are insinuating themselves into our DNA, determining our causality and parasitizing our emotions. The sum total of experiences supposed to create the patchwork of our identity is replaced by cold foreign shadows, by a ghost that is not our own. Ideology without experience, aesthetics without emotion, connection without sensation. Ultimately, the most perverse of all is probably that of deconstruction. Faced with life's potential disappointments, people are left to hope that they can break free from their mental prison with enough willpower and questioning. An illusion of dissidence persists and finds a way, but the grand scheme of things remains unchanged. In the post-reality era, indignation becomes controlled opposition, signifying no threat to the status quo. Worse still, becoming the latter's armed wing. Digital activism into ideology in its purest form. Identity politics sectarianizing every day a little more into a new chapel debate and making any hope of intersectionality increasingly remote. In a century where everything seems grotesque and surreal, these claims that seem to belong to us become nothing more than a top layer of simulation, an additional frequency added to the white noise that strangles us. Everyone creates their own personal reality, their own solipsism, and withdraws from the battlefield in smug detachment. Everyone plays their game within the game, virtual reality headsets screwed on, while developers parasitize the computing power of our networked brains to give birth to their illegitimate god. The lure of a convenient deconstruction, where you can sell your bubbling revolutionary zeal for the price of the artificial paradise of an immaculate, praxis-free ideology. The appeal of reformism, or conversely, of letting yourself go in nihilism, hedonism, and accelerationism, confirmation bias, echo chambers, the search for what activates the reward circuit, and the flight from what increases cortisol levels. And yet, there's never any substantial gain without a dangerous gamble. To deconstruct is to die. The parasitic ideas that violate our minds are now part of us. Their tendrils have crept into every fold of our brain, replacing synapses and entwining our neurons. To attack this symbiotic relationship is to attack ourselves. Those who wish to free themselves from conditioning are committed to accepting the death of the ego with detachment in order to welcome liberation and rebirth. When the data carrier is perverted by its own operating system, there's only one road left to take: complete formatting and reinstallation of another OS. In the face of conditioning, the only way out is to die just to be reborn ready.